This 27-inch OLED gaming monitor from Acer has a maximum resolution and refresh rate of 1440p at 240 Hz. A friend of mine was kind enough to let me borrow it and see how it performs. It came with all the necessary cables as well as a stand, which needed to be assembled but didn't require any tools at all. The stand allows the display to adjust the height up and down or tilt towards or away from you. It also has basic wire management in the back. The stand doesn't allow for rotation at all though, so if that's a feature you need, you'll have to buy a different stand. This monitor comes with the necessary extenders, which allow you to mount it to any VESA mount, including a desk stand that rotates if that's something you need. Anyway, this monitor has one DisplayPort 1.4 and two HDMI 2.1 ports on the bottom, as well as a 3.5mm headphone jack and the DC power input for the external power brick. The menu is accessed by a single joystick-style button and back, and it's pretty clunky. I honestly don't know any PC monitor with a nice menu control, or even one with a remote, so I guess the best way to describe this is just as annoying as all other PC monitor menus. There are speakers built in, which are just as okay as all the other monitor speakers I've heard, but the volume adjustment is buried deep in the menu, which can get annoying. One thing to note is if you're setting the display lower resolutions, there's a super sharpness setting in the picture menu you might want to try. I was really curious what the true latency would be using this display, and when setting it 60 Hz, it was around 12 milliseconds, within a millisecond depending on which progressive scan resolution you send it. And it did support 480i at a higher latency as well as 240p, but you shouldn't really send displays like this lower than 480p without a scaler. Speaking of which, I used the RetroTink 4K to test the panel in its native refresh rates. I started by sending its native 240 Hz refresh rate. The lag tester is showing about 13 milliseconds of lag, but the Tink is adding about 13. That's awesome. That means this display had 1 millisecond of lag or less running in its native 240 Hz modes. I wanted to try 120 Hz output as well, since many game consoles will max out at 120. The Acer is showing about 12.5 milliseconds of lag, but 9.2 of that is coming from the Tink, so that's only about 3 milliseconds of lag in 120 Hz mode. As a note, if you're a PC gamer, run this panel in its native refresh rate whenever possible. Even if the games themselves max out at 60 or 120 frames per second, your video card will just double or quadruple each frame. That will look identical to your eyes as the original frame rate, however, you'll be sending the monitor its native refresh rate, which means you could take advantage of the lower latency modes. The panel itself looks nice and sharp when running in its native 1440p resolution, and this is partly due to its qd-oled panel. Here's a macro shot of an all-white square in the middle with its OLED perfect blacks to the right where the subpixels are off. This is definitely not something you could see on an LCD panel. If you're a retro gaming fan, this display is fully compatible with the 1440p output of the Mister in its lowest latency modes, as well as the OSSC even with an SNES, and it's even compatible with the RetroTink 5X's unsupported 1440p mode. And of course, a RetroTink 4K worked perfectly, and all of these looked amazing running at the native resolution of the panel. Also, I could confirm it was definitely bright enough to use CRT mask filters and BFI at the same time, as long as you're in a dim room, of course. This monitor doesn't have any BFI options built in, which isn't surprising as it's meant to be a lower cost display. But if you have a scaler or PC software that could add it to the signal, and you're not photosensitive, and you're in a dark room, definitely try BFI on this display. Overall, I really liked it and definitely thought it was worth the money. If you'd like a deeper dive review and a lot more retro gaming focused testing, please check out the main review over on the Retro RGB channel.